To order the meeting between Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority, Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue, and Western Lane Ambulance District. This meeting is being recorded. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
and
and
to
to
the
the republic for which it
stands
stands,
one
one
nation
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all. Thank you. Holly, could you do roll call, please?
Yes. Western Lane Directors, Director Murphy,
Here.
Director Russell,
Here.
Director Webb,
Here.
Director Yesney,
Here.
Director Farnsworth,
Here.
Siuslaw Valley Fire Directors, Director Hickson, Director Polisi,
Here.
Director Spade,
Here.
Director Green,
Here.
Director Burns.
Here.
For WLFEA, Director Murphy,
Here.
Director Spade,
Here.
Director Russell,
Here.
and Director Polisi.
Here.
Okay, we do have quorums for all three agencies. Now I'd like to open up the opportunity for the public to speak. We do have one person signed up, Mr. Pilcher. And just a second, we'll get you have 3 minutes and you're welcome to start at any time.
Hey, I'm RJ Pilcher, 87842 Sandra Street, Florence, Oregon, 97439. I'm a member of the Western Lane Ambulance District Budget Committee. These comments are for all of the boards. Chief Schick has put feelers out to the Budget Committee members to see if they're planning to participate in the upcoming budget process. So with the budget process on the horizon, I see that there are 2 workshops in the budget process for WLFEA this year, though it does not state who will be participating in those workshops.
You might be able to minimize the clock.
The process used last year left me as a budget committee participant, and I believe some of Western Lane Ambulance District's board in the dark and misled. With the workshop format, I am hopeful that for that process will produce a better product for the budget committee's deliberations while fulfilling their duties. I, for one, do not want a repeat of the process that we had last year, but it still leaves questions on delivery to the budget committees. Will the WLFEA budget be presented to each budget committee separately as it happened last year? Or will the WLFEA budget be presented in a special joint board meeting? Or will the WLFEA budget be presented in a special combined joint board budget committee meeting just to discuss and accept or reject that portion of our district's budget? If so, it is not scheduled. So the question is, will the boards get together and make policy for future WLFEA budgets so that there is consistency going forward in preparation and delivery? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pilcher. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak?
No.
Okay, so if you will give me 30 seconds, we're going to swear in our new lieutenants and our fire marshal, and I have them in the other room. And we'll be doing the oath of office. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So lieutenants, if you raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Kyle Roscoe,
Do solemnly swear to do my duty as a lieutenant for Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue to the best of my ability.
do solemnly swear to do my duty as lieutenant of Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue to the best of my ability.
to serve my commanding officers with respect and loyalty,
serve my commanding officers with respect and loyalty,
to serve the citizens of our community with compassion, courage, and integrity,
to serve the citizens of our community with passion,
to represent my fire department and community with honor and dignity, both on and off duty,
to represent my fire department and community with honor and dignity, both on and off duty,
and to uphold the laws and constitutions of the United States of America, the state of Oregon, and the communities we protect.
and to uphold the laws and the constitutions of the United States of America, the state of Oregon, and the communities we protect.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. So now we're going to do pinning. So you've got some significant people in your lives that are going to place your pins. Congratulations to our newest lieutenants. Thank you. And now we're also going to swear in our newest fire marshal. You can see him on the screen. He's not here, he's over in Bend. So Tony, if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Tony Miller,
Do solemnly swear to do my duty as a fire marshal for Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority to the best of my ability,
do solemnly swear to do my duty as a fire marshal for Western Lane Fire EMS Authority to the best of my ability,
to serve my commanding officers with respect and loyalty,
to serve my commanding officer with respect and loyalty,
serve the citizens of our community with compassion, courage, and integrity,
to serve the citizens of our community with compassion, courage, and integrity,
to represent my department and community with honor and dignity, both on and off duty,
to represent my department and community with honor and dignity, both on and off duty,
and to uphold the laws and constitutions of the United States of America, the state of Oregon, and the communities we protect.
and to uphold the laws and constitutions of the United States of America, the state of Oregon, and the communities we protect.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. And I believe your wife is going to.
Yay.
Congratulations, Fire Marshal Miller. Yay. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
I need your phone really quick. Hurry.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next agenda item while Keith is on his way back into the office. I would like to introduce our auditors, Mark Hausen and Kathy Marciniak from Emerald CPA Group.
Dina, can we mute all non-board members, please? We're getting a lot of feedback.
Yes,
Put your camera over there. Maybe you should move the whole thing over there.
I think Kathy, I'm trying to unmute you, Kathy.
There's Kathy.
Okay, so we're trying to get Mark's video going and it's not working. So we're confused.
All right,
I
Well-
think we have his audio, but I don't think we have his video.
Can you hear us?
sure,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead, Mark. You could speak up a little bit.
Hello,
There's Mark.
it's not showing the video. Where? It's not appear.
There you are. Click on the little dots. Click on the dots. you're in that square. And go up to the upper right-hand corner and see if it's,
We can hear you, Mark.
You can talk if you want.
Yeah, I guess
To have video.
you just won't have my video here. Yeah.
Okay, Mark, well, you can just go ahead and present
Okay,
with just your voice.
all right.
I've got some sock puppets, if that helps.
I've never seen anything like that. I've never had a problem, you know.
Is Mark there?
Well, yeah, I understand that there's some questions for me today.
Well, if you want to just give a general overview on the audits first, and then we can open it up for questions.
All right, all right. Well, generally speaking, there was a clean opinion for all three of the audits. So we didn't have really anything to report as far as changing. One thing that we talked about before was using the government pool for investments versus the local bank. The interest rate is better with the government pool, but you may have other reasons for not doing that. I don't know. And those questions about the pension and whether the GASB statements versus the budget financials, and the main difference between the GASB report, the net position and activities, is the pension differences. And those come, basically, we get the information from the PERS. They have an actuary that forms this, and they give one every year. They put out the information that we need to include in the report. And part of the problem is that the information they use is late. It doesn't match up. They do it as of December, and year end is June. So there's always that kind of a difference. Plus the information is a year old. But there's not much we can do about that. We can't estimate what the change is going to be. We have no way of knowing how to come up with the estimate. For example, if you were to look on the Western Lane, the ambulance district, on page 25, you'll see where they list the differences that occurred during the year. And we have no way of knowing what those are going to be. So it's virtually impossible to guess what the change is going to be for the year. So we're totally relying on what the actuaries come up with. And that's a big number for the differences between the budget and for the GASB information and the position statement. Plus, the last couple of years, there's been a change in what they say the investment rate is, what they use in their statements. At one time, just several years ago, they were using for investment rate of 7.75% interest that they expected to earn during the year, which is too high and has been for several years. And so they've had to make up for part of that because now they've got it down to 7.2% interest that they expect to make during the year, which is more reasonable. But still, that's what has promoted liability, the unfunded liability, which is a couple $1 million, which is a really large number. There's not much but the only you can do with that is to pay whatever they come up with every year, tell you what to pay, or you can pay an additional amount into it and try to work the liability down. But as far as the regular audit, that's just pretty common for what you have. There's nothing too unusual about it, about everybody. We have a lot of municipal clients that are in the same position where they have large pension liabilities, and they have no way of estimating what it's going to be the following year. So and I guess the other change, but if you're comparing the GASB statement with the budget, is that on a budget, you budget capital outlays, and for the net position statement, we capitalize large expenditures over $5,000, and we include those in the depreciation schedule. And so we have an entry for depreciation every year, which is what you don't have on the budget. The budget is just the capital outlays for the current year. So that's the two main differences if you're comparing statements, net position statement with the budget statements. Is there any questions I can answer?
Okay, we do have,
Yeah.
go ahead and raise your hand in the Zoom feature. And then if you are asking a question about a specific agency, make sure you mention that agency. So Rick, your hand is up.
Yes, I've got several questions and comments regarding Western Lane Ambulance District. And these are kind of all rolled together. So if you'll bear with me, I'll roll through all these questions in kind of an order, because it kind of helped me to understand what's going on in the audit versus our monthly financial statements that we receive internally. And because the issue really is that our internal statements at the end of the year that are included in the audit, back in the back, actually show an excess of revenue over expenditures of $426,000. But our budgeted statement shows a decrease in our net position of $221,000. And so the first question, I guess, for Mark and Kathy would be, it looks to me, if I take the changes in deferred inflows, outflows, and pension liability on the audit, which are things that we don't report internally, that actually decreases our fund balance by $641,000. And the difference between our internal financials and your audit is $647,000. So like Mark said, I'm assuming that the major difference between the audit and our internal statement is we don't record inflows, outflows, and pension liabilities, which are all related. Those three things are related. And they're the major drivers. I know we got capital, we have deferred post-employment benefits and things like that, but really it's driven by our pension liability. Would that be true? Okay. So
yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is true.
So, okay.
That's the difference. The budget statements are directly off of your budget, your activities, and the net position and activity statements are based on what's called GASB, which are rules that were put in force by the American Institute of CPAs about 5 years ago. Because prior to that time, we didn't record the liability. We recorded what was paid during the year. And now the idea is that you should know what the liability is calculated at. And so now we have to include that every year. And the main problem with that is there's so many variables in calculating that that change from year to year. The investment can change.
Right.
You add people to it, you subtract people for it. So
Right.
it's virtually impossible for a CPA to calculate that. It has to be done by the actuaries.
Okay.
And so we, once a year, we're given a list of what the actuaries come up with, and that's what we book. Besides that, the information they're using is a year older than what's is happening in your the municipality during the year. So that's another difference.
Mhm.
So it's just virtually, I say it's impossible to come up with a number to try to accrue each year, each month, to come up with what's going to happen at the end of the year.
Right. Okay, so with that in mind, and when I looked at the GASB changes, it looked like our fiscal year ended June 30th, 2014 was the last year that we had audit statements that looked basically like our internal statements. So the last 6 years of audit reports have been on this different basis of accounting. And it's been presented at a prior meeting that there's been a deterioration in that net position over the last 5 years. However, what I'd like to note is if you take the 6 years that we've actually had the statement in effect, our net position has started out at about 2.7 million at the beginning of 2015, and we're now at 2.5 million. So the decrease has been $160,000 because there was a $700,000 increase in our net position in 2015. If you take the same 6 years and look at our operations from a budget standpoint, we've added $1.5 million to our fund balance, averaging about $250,000 a year in revenues exceeding expenditures. But we've had a slight negative change in position. So the liability for the pension has eaten up any net excess revenue that we've had over the last 6 years. But we're basically in the same position we were 6 years ago, even with the pension liability. And I think that was an eye opener to me, actually. And to make it, I guess I would ask, and this may not be really good to ask because it's not on the same basis, but when you look at our statement of net position, and we have an unrestricted balance of $1.6 million, does that mean if we basically kept our capital assets but liquidated all our debt, sold our land for $350,000, and could in effect, and I know we can't, but paid off our deferred inflows, outflows, and our pension liability, we'd still have $1.6 million left. Is that would that be true?
Well, not really, because it's really your net position is $2.5 million.
But that includes the investment in capital assets. So
Right,
that out.
right.
Okay.
So if you sold your capital assets for the stated value, you would have a basis of $2.5 million left.
Yeah, I guess my point would be we need the assets to operate, but we could actually liquidate what GASB shows as our pension liability, our inflows and outflows, and still have 1.6 million in cash, keeping our capital assets. That's kind of what
that's correct, because you're including in there your liabilities 2.9 million pension liability.
That's right. Those would be paid off. So, and going forward for the board, you know, I know the pension is a big deal, and we've talked about this a lot, and we're coming up to budget season. And one thing I don't think has been said yet at the board meeting is we do have our new PERS rates. And I remember last spring, we were really concerned that it would look like the actuary was saying the minimum increase in our payroll rates that we would pay for PERS was about 5%. We were talking about maybe 9%. And the actual rates that came out actually showed that the tier 1 and tier 2 folks, we're going to have a decrease of 0.4% in what we're paying on PERS. And on the OPSRP, it's a 2.25% increase. So that's, to me, was some pretty good. Now that's an increase not of the payment, but of the percentage of payroll we pay. So it's still a significant amount, but quite a bit less than what we were hearing from the actuaries back at that time. So that's some more good news. And the other thing is, I don't know, maybe if people are interested, there's a 2020 PERS by the numbers report that is really excellent. And it basically shows that if we continue to have a 7.2% return on our assets in PERS over the next 20 years, our unfunded liability decreases from about 28 million down to less than $10 million. And that's without an increase in our contribution rate to PERS. So you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to change in actuaries, but what we have to contribute is equal to what we put in, what we pay to our members, the benefits is equal to our employer contributions plus earnings. And I think it shows that if, as Mark said, the earnings rate's been reduced to 7.2% from what was much higher, 7.758%, which is more reasonable. And our current contribution rate actually shows a decrease in the unfunded liability over time. So I think these are all kind of, it doesn't mean to me, I mean, I'm just saying this to say how I kind of look at the statements and look at our internal statements. And I know PERS has been a big deal for us, and we've been trying to mitigate what we have been added to our liability. But I'm feeling actually a little more optimistic than I have on our position with and heading forward with PERS at this point in time. So thanks for answering those questions and for letting me talk a little bit about where I kind of read the financial statements going forward. Thank you.
Larry, you're up next.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Rick, for your thoughts. You know, a lot of these accounting machinations can be confusing to people. And intelligent people can disagree about them. But what's remarkable is I'm looking at the audit report where we summarize the revenues, expenses, and the changes in net position. The deferred inflow and outflow of resources is not a line item in that calculation. The statement includes revenues, expenses, non-operating revenues, and comes up with a net position. So PERS has nothing to do. The unfunded actuarial liability certainly is a debt that is owned by the district, but it doesn't account for the change in our net position. And so I'm curious to know how our district went from a reported gain in our monthly financials last year, ending June 30th, of $386,000, revenues minus expenses, to the same thing in the audit report, revenues minus expenses, to a net loss of $221,000.
Well, the one thing you're not considering is that the changes in the pension liability is posted to the pension expense in the GASB statements. But you don't see that. You don't see the changes that occur in the deferred inflows and the deferred outflows. So, and the other assumptions that changes are made, that all wraps up into whatever the increase in the pension is.
Okay, but I don't see a line item in either our monthly financials
it's in the personal services. That's where the change in pension is.
Okay, so what you're suggesting is that in the personal services line item in your audit report, that includes the pension liability.
It includes the pension change during the year.
All right, so
it includes what you pay in cash plus whatever the change comes through the pension information.
Okay, well, according to my reason, are you using GASB 75, Mark?
Well, use 68 and 75.
Okay, well, GASB
68 is the pension change, and 75 is the change in the insurance that you provide.
Right. And in GASB 75, it says employer contributions subsequent to the measurement date of the net liability are required to be reported as deferred outflows of resources. In governmental fund financial statements, a net liability is required to be recognized to the extent the liability is normally expected to be liquidated with expendable available financial resources. So we just recently got a new estimate from the actuaries. Our net unfunded pension actuarial accrued liability in 2017 was $2,870,000 that this district owes. That grew to $3,428,376. That's a huge change in 2 years. And I doubt that the $221,000, if what you're saying is correct, that you accrued for the difference in inflows and outflows amounts to only $221,000. That's a swing of $500,000 for this district, maybe $600,000 between our monthly financial statements and the auditor's report. So according to the auditor's report, each year we've lost money. And each year that pension liability grows. And if we're counting some future income stream, we're not following GASB 75 because it says you're supposed to post against current available resources. Well, the only available resource I know that we have is our PERS site account. So if you took 3.4 million and subtracted the 350,000, that's a huge liability that our taxpayers face down the road.
First of all, the pension includes both the 75 and 68. It's not just the 68. So both liabilities are included in there in the change. And we look at the change from year to year. We look at what the deferred outflow is at the end of the prior year and compare that to the other year. And the differences between those is what we add to the pension expense on the net position statement and activities report.
I understand, and you said many times there's no way to know, how to do this calculation because, as you said, it's published by the actuaries every couple of years. But there must be a better way for this district to present its true financial condition on a balance sheet than just a WAG.
Well, it is a true position. I mean, that's what we're given. I mean, I can't come up with an estimate and compare that with an actuary. I'm not an actuary, and no accountants are. And if you look at the page on, let's see, what is it? '25, you can see where the calculation is coming up with the deferred outflow, the changes that happen during the year that they make.
Are you talking about 25 of the audit report?
Yes.
Okay.
And Western Line Ambulance.
Could you go through that with us for us?
Sure. Okay, deferred outflow. The first one is the differences between the expected and actual experience. That's $160,000. And the net changes of the assumptions during the year, $395,000. Changes in proportionate shares, $274,000. And the difference between employer contributions and proportionate share of system contributions, $48,000. And that adds up to $878,000. And then, since it's a year difference between what the actuary are using and what you actually pay in during the year on the pension, you add $315,000. And that comes out with the deferred out resources, which is listed as basically an asset. And then you look at the other side on deferred inflows, same changes, same types of changes. This comes up with a $250,000. And then we compare those with the prior year's balances.
So basically, you're showing an asset of 1,000,002 and a liability against that of 250,000. Is that right?
Uh, Yes, plus the pension liability.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The pension liability is
It's a
3.4.
separate item. It's not the same.
Okay.
Those are separate items.
So I thought we were talking about pensions here.
We are. They're all part of the pension.
Okay.
And if you look at, let's see, where is it? Let's see what page it is. Oh, if you look at page 29, okay, you can see, right, you can see what the difference is by just changing the investment rate, 1%. If you lower from 7.2 to 6.2, it increases what, 1,000,007 in pension liability. And if you go the other way, it decreases. It goes, if your investment is 8.2%, you lower your liability by 1.5 million. So it's very sensitive, just a little increase.
Oh, I agree. And so, the concern of our board and the concern of our community is that the state has a pension program that is not actuarially funded for the level of benefits that have been promised. In fact, it's so egregious that even the New York Times pointed to the state of Oregon PERS system as being one of the worst in the nation in terms of this issue. And so as a district, what we have struggled with is how do we communicate properly in our financials that this district carries this liability. Of course, when we have a liability like this, it's like having a large amount of money that you owe, and the state decides what your due date is, when you have to pay it. And because the state thought these reimbursement rates were going to go through the roof, they kicked the can down the road last year and changed the amortization rate from 20 years to 22 years. But there's no dispute here that our pension plan, like many around in other states of the country, is in serious financial trouble, and the taxpayers are those who are going to have to pay up. And so my view is that our financials should correctly reflect that potential cost to taxpayers.
That's what the net position statement does do.
I don't believe it shows it to the extent that it exists.
Well, I don't know what to tell you because
Well,
that's
we'll
the
have
number
to
we're given.
we'll have to agree to disagree then.
Okay.
Do you have anything, other questions, Larry?
Not at this time.
Any other questions from directors? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mark and Kathy, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your feedback and the reports. You're welcome to stick around, or you can take off at your wish. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay.
How do we get out?
So moving on with our agenda, we have consent agenda, including meeting minutes from regular meeting on December 17th, the staff reports and correspondence, and we had a lot of nice thank you letters. So is there any items that a director wanted to pull out from our consent agenda?
I wanted to review the report where we talk about hiring a replacement in the ambulance district. Was that the chief's report?
That could have been, we can do that. It probably was. I'm
It's
looking
page
at,
6, page 6 of the chief's report.
yes. Okay, we'll put that under, we'll move that to the first item under new business. Is there any other items the director would like to pull out? Hearing none, is there any objection to the consent agenda other than what's been modified? Okay, the consent agenda then consists of meeting minutes, the staff reports, minus the one item from the chief's report, and the thank you letters. Okay, review of monthly financials.
Okay, I'll take that. Got a couple things to report tonight. I did make the capital reserve account transfers in December. 375,000 for Sayusla Valley Fire and 120,000 for Western Lane Ambulance. That was according to our budget. I will also be presenting next month resolutions to both boards for appropriations transfers to adjust the budgets to what the collective bargaining agreements are ending up to be. And we have some grants to bring into the budget. And as Mark stated earlier, one of the audit recommendations last year was for us to look into the local government investment pool for our savings accounts. So I am doing that. And I will be giving a presentation. It'll be on the agenda next month for information and for the board to discuss. I also wanted to mention that in the financial reports, in the budget versus actual reports, under grants, there are 2 grants that we have received from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. They were put under miscellaneous grants as income, and I have separated them out so next month you will actually see the miscellaneous grants actually identified as the Coronavirus Relief Act Fund. The Sayusla Valley received $18,130 for a fit test machine, and Western Lane Ambulance received $32,770 for 2 hands-free resuscitation devices. I also wanted to mention that we will be adding a Life Med report, just a regular budget versus actual Life Med report to the Western Lane financials starting next month, in addition to the Life Med analysis report that's already in there. And that's all I have. I'm available for questions.
I have a question. I wonder what the other directors think about a better way to present the monthly profit and loss when we show the revenue for the entire year against December or against expenses in a particular period. It's not a very helpful management tool if you have to do the math on every line item to see how you're tracking for expenses and revenues. Is there some way for us to, using the accrual method of accounting, use 1/12 of our expected income against the actual expenses in the period? It's just very hard to figure out. I mean, when you show a huge profit because you got all your tax revenue in a particular month, that makes it very difficult. So if we get all of our tax revenue in November, December, wow, we made a ton of money, but you can't really tell how you're doing on a month-to-month basis.
Wouldn't it be kind of hard to break it down into 12ths? Because we don't know what months, like you say, we're actually getting true income.
I would say that we should use our budget amount, and you could correct it as you figure out whether or not you got all your tax money in. The tax money generally comes in within what, 2 months, Dina?
November and December.
Right. So, and this is sort of what we did with the LifeMed report. We annualized that so that we could get a better idea of our financial position. It's very difficult right now to look at November and December finances. You really only get a very clear picture of how we're doing until the 11th or 12th month of the year. And so what I was going to suggest is, for the sake of clarity, if we knew that we were budgeting, each month a certain amount, that would give us a much clearer picture of how we're doing month to month. Most people that were looking in our website to look at the finances, this would go right over their heads, because they'd be looking at it and going, wow, we made $1.8 million in 1 month.
No, you divide it by 12.
Right. You divide it by 12, and maybe you put it in the report that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because the money's coming in, it's going into our money market account, and then we bring it into the budget as needed, or bring it into the expense accounts as needed. So I just think it might be a better management tool to be able to see 1/12 of the revenue against 1/12 of the expenses each month.
It gives a clearer picture, as you said, Bishop.
I've got a suggestion. Something that we did and we used to do, but we stopped I don't remember when, maybe a few years ago, but we used to include last year's report as a side so you could look at it. There's some seasonality within the districts, and you want to see when cash flows in and when cash flows out, particularly tax revenue. So it's nice to have October compared to October of the prior year, just to get an idea where were you on budget last year as compared to this year. That was very useful tool.
Well, and Mike makes a good point. We do have that report in our financials in this packet, and that is a helpful tool. But if you're looking at a straight profit and loss statement, you can't tell, on a monthly basis how you're doing. If you're always comparing to last year, it's going to have, as you said, Mike, the same ripple effect when all the tax money comes in. So maybe staff could come up with a recommendation for us about what you could do in terms of a report.
Well, we've already got that LifeMed report. Is that what you want?
Well, it could be similar. So what I'm suggesting is, if you look at your budget for annual revenue and divide it by 12, if you could apportion that to the 12 months of the year, or maybe you want to put more revenue in summer months because you have higher expenses in summer months. There is some seasonality, as Mike mentions. But if you could more closely show something approximating 1/12 of your annual income against each month's expenses, that would be a lot easier optic for people to look at and examine the finances of the district. Otherwise, you really have to wait until June to really get a picture. You have to wait till July to see what happened in June.
Gives you a true picture.
Right.
It can't give us a true picture because it's a projected number, not the actuals. It's a guess, still guessing.
Yeah, so it is still a guess, but my suggestion would be is, let's say, for example, you budgeted $2 million and you divide that by 12, and you use that number until you get your tax revenue in, the majority of which comes in November, December. You could make an adjustment to your 1/12 entry based on that and use that the rest of the year. That would give you a much easier picture to look at, because it is very, very difficult to read our financials and figure out, whoa, how did all this revenue come in November, December, and equate that to the expenses. It looks like we made a ton of money, and it's hard to say that we lost money that month. Maybe our call volume was down, or maybe our services revenue was less. It's really hard to see that when you have a skewed picture. So I throw that out as a suggestion. Dina, if you want to visit with me, I'd be happy to make suggestions.
Well, I do have one concern, and that is with QuickBooks. QuickBooks is limited. So in order to do the life med analysis report, we have to do a lot. We have to export it to Excel. We have to do a lot of customization. My concern is customizing existing reports and really drilling it down to fine tune customization. I'm afraid there's going to be mistakes. You know, I'd be more than happy to talk to you a little bit more. I'd like to hear what Ron Green has to say.
Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna, having only a millionth of a percentage of knowledge of QuickBooks that Dina does. I'm very concerned about system limitations. I'm very concerned about burden on staff, and I'm concerned about manual errors. I agree with Larry that this is not perfect, but I don't think no matter what we put out on the website, if the public person who's reviewing this is not a finance person, they're not going to understand it anyway. The public message should always be, if you want to know what's going on, approach the board, talk to the chief. I don't find this that difficult. I'm mostly concerned about what are we asking of staff to produce, and is it truly necessary? And if there's anything that's other than actual, I think making a guesstimate of budget, I think we need to have something of this steeped in the actual collection, not just what we think we're going to collect. I don't know. I'm just concerned about, are we doing what's the right thing given the burden it could create? Was that necessary?
Well, I agree with you, Ron. I think QuickBooks is how we keep our books. I'm talking about a management tool, so I wouldn't be suggesting this had to be done within QuickBooks. I don't want to change what you're doing in that dynamic, but we do the LifeMed report, you know, in an Excel, and it's possible that we could find a better way to examine these finances, because there are sometimes, as we've said before, we kind of look at expenses. Sometimes a particular cost or line item occurs in just 1 month of the year. And so that particular line item will show we've spent 100% of the budget and it's only August. Well, that's because all of those expenses happen in July and August. So I'm just thinking if there's some way that we can improve the viability of our reports, I'm all for it. So I'd be happy to talk with you, Dina. Maybe there's something we can come up with, maybe there isn't, but I think it should be explored.
I think it might be similar, Dina, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like our MIH grant, where we've booked all the revenue, we just put in, well, the 2-year revenue source, so we 1/24th each month, and then against expenses. So it may be something like that. So yeah, we can look at that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the financials? Okay, not seeing any. Going to new business, and we moved the paramedic position. Director Farnsworth, you had questions on that?
Yes, I did. I believe as a board, we, looking at our staffing model and making it more efficient, I believe we decided that we would move towards a paramedic EMT model in the ambulance. So I'm just curious to know, when we hired the most recent staff member, did we hire that person as an EMT or did we hire a paramedic?
This case is a little bit different. The position that we said is open is actually not open. This is the paramedic that's out on workers' comp. So we really don't have an open position. I believe she's got 2 years to return, although we think that's unlikely. So right now it's more of a temporary hire. Our overtime, part-time overtime budget was getting really high. So Chief House and I discussed this. So we just moved her to a full-time position to help us control scheduling and our overtime costs. So,
well, that's exactly my question. Do we bring her to a full-time EMT position or an full-time paramedic position?
She was a part-time paramedic, so we just moved her to a full-time paramedic position.
Okay, well, I disagree with that, respectfully.
Sure.
You know, anytime we have any kind of turnover, whether it's in this particular situation or any other, we need to take every opportunity to hire EMT level staff and reduce the number of paramedic staff we have. If we're true to the mission that we stated, which was a paramedic and an EMT, we can't just decide that because our part-timers are paramedics, that they get brought on as paramedics. Otherwise, we will never move to a paramedic EMT model.
Okay,
I have a question on that.
sure.
Wouldn't it be required, since it's a person that's on a leave, to replace like with like? Meaning if it's a paramedic position that is, that they're backfilling because they're on a leave, don't we have to replace it with another paramedic?
No, I don't think that's a legal requirement. It's not in the contract or policies. We would have to maintain an ALS ambulance. But that would be the only, I think that would be the only rule that would apply there.
Well, is it fair to say that if we make this a full-time permanent position, that we could hire an EMT instead of a paramedic?
We can hire, that is correct. We can hire EMTs or paramedics for our positions, as long as we maintain a specific number of paramedics, that's correct.
Right, and we discussed that we were overweighted in the paramedics category.
Yeah, we didn't open this. I mean, we didn't advertise for a position. We didn't open it up. We had Mackenzie that was filling that position.
I understand.
And just, as for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, Chief House and I thought that was the best move, was just to make that permanent for her. Assuming that, the workers' comp issue is going to resolve and that paramedics not coming back. Any other questions on that? Okay. So just next item. I know I've emailed, I think I've emailed the board. This is the SVFR issue. I think I've emailed you, but we did hire Conway Pebley and Nick Terrell. They are starting, their first day is February 1st. They've cleared their medical exam and their psych evals. So they've passed all their pre-appointment testing. Conway, as you remember, or you may know, Conway Pebley is a former volunteer firefighter with us, so it was nice to offer him the opportunity to move up to the career ranks. Nick Terrell is currently a firefighter with the department south of us, Charleston Fire Department. We had a very competitive process, many fantastic candidates, a lot of great internal candidates, so it was a tough decision. So now we'll have 2 firefighters scheduled 24/7. That's what we were talking about when we went out, to increase our levy. So we've made that commitment to our citizens. My goal is to have 4 firefighters on 24/7. So we're relying on our volunteers and some part-time firefighters to make up those other 2 positions. So still a lot of our opportunities for our volunteers, and we're still trying to make sure that they're involved and have the opportunities that they're looking for as well. So if you see Conway and Nick around the station, please congratulate them. Next action item concerns a training coordinator wage bonus. So over a year ago, we had Kyle Orozco take over responsibility for the fire department training. He's been doing this in addition to his regular duties as a firefighter engineer, and as of January 1, as a lieutenant. So, and his training responsibilities have been done with no additional compensation. Now, if we look at the Western Lane side, the training coordinator receives a well-deserved 10% bonus. And we are proposing that we do the same for the fire side, for SVFR. So we are asking for a motion to approve a 10% increase to the annual base wage for the training coordinator position. Again, this is for SVFR. Jim.
I make a motion that we approve that. That is a very difficult position to add on to normal daily functions, and it's well warranted.
Chief, can you explain exactly what the additional responsibilities are? Just
so he has to develop the annual training plan, implement the annual training plan. He has to document all continuing education requirements. He has to certify, make sure firefighters are certified and maintain their certifications with the state. As a former training chief, I'm just amazed that anybody can do this. And that was my only job was training chief. So for him to have to do this as well as a lieutenant, and same on the Western Lane side, we got Rob Chance who does this in addition. So it's a lot of work. So it's something that's extremely important. He had to take a lot of time at the beginning. Our training program was a little bit of a mess. So he got everything fixed on that end with the state. Very involved with the state level. So it's a very busy position.
And Chief, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
I was saying, what's required of the training coordinator in terms of their ongoing education and able to be a training coordinator?
We don't specify any. A lot of that is through his position as lieutenant. So he is certified as a fire instructor 2, I believe. Of course, he has to maintain all his certifications. Kyle is a high achiever for us, so he has gone way past any minimal certification requirements. So he's doing a good job. But there is no specific requirements to be a training coordinator.
But Chief, isn't he following under NFPA?
We do adhere as much as possible to NFPA for our size
Right.
department. Yes.
And that means not only the NFPA standards, but he also has to do the DPST, correct?
That is correct.
That's a lot of work. And it's the bonus is well worth it, because if you look at the changes coming down the pipe from NFPA, he's got some work cut out for him, for us, for the community.
Yes. Director Green, you had a comment.
Just a question. So the 10% increase in salary, well, first off, I should say that given the level and quantity of work, I have no concerns about the dollars being awarded, but just supporting the 10%, is it because it was based on comparing it to the comparable position on the Western Lane side only?
That is correct.
Okay, so we don't really have any market data to support the wages appropriate, but it's in-house, we have that comparison.
I think we could look for that. It'd be difficult. Most departments have it. That's their only job responsibility is training officer.
Nope, I just wanted to get that out there. So I just, I would second Director Polisi's motion.
Cool. Director Murphy, did you want to say something? You're muted, John. You're muted.
He's never sounded better though.
Just a point of order. Remember, we're supposed to be following Robert's rules of order. We had a motion on the floor. We're supposed to have a second, then go into discussion.
I'm assuming Ned, I thought you seconded. Maybe you did not.
No, I asked those questions just so that we could flesh out exactly what the position was and what the responsibilities were.
I believe we did have a second from Ron. So, okay, it's open for discussion.
Everything he said.
Okay.
Chief?
Yes.
It's Jim. The NFPA 1401 new requirements, are we set up for him to document everything for every member of the agency?
As it pertains to Oregon, Oregon is a little bit different. They're a little bit behind. I was just involved with the fire officer task force. And so those are the 2020 guidelines, but again, those haven't been adopted by the state. So if they've been adopted by the state, absolutely, we would be looking at that.
Okay, so we're looking that Oregon will adopt 1401 eventually. So should we start gearing our agency that direction or not?
You mean 1001 or 1401?
It's 1401, recommended practices for training reports and records.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking 1001. 1401. So again, he would be following Oregon state rules for documentation. I can't tell you, Jim, how that compares to the NFPA standard. I would assume it would be similar.
It should be. It should be. Everybody else says so. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So for any further discussion? So SVFR board members only, all in favor of the 10% annual wage bonus, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes. Thank you. So the next item, approved submission of grant proposals, and this is for both SVFR and Western Lane. So the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Process, and you'll hear us talk a lot about that as AFG. That's an annual grant that is from the federal government. It's through FEMA. I think they have $800 billion available for fire departments typically. It's also open to public EMS agencies. As usual, we have a very short window in which to apply. And so we'd like to get approval for submitting a grant request for a new fire engine for SVFR and to submit a grant request for new cardiac monitors for Western Lane Ambulance District. We'll need each board to approve the submission of the grants and the associated cost match if we are awarded the grant. So cost match typically for our size agency is around 10%. It could go down to 5%, but typically it's 10, and that's what I've listed as the cost match. Like I said, public EMS agencies are eligible for these grants, although they're lower on the priority. I'm hoping maybe that there'll be fewer departments applying this year. I don't know why, but it goes up and down every year. That maybe we can do that with Western Lane. And with the cardiac monitors, again, we had pushed that out to next year, but if we can get a grant, we'll go quicker. And we're also looking at making this a regional grant. So we would get a monitor for SVFR, we would get a monitor for Mapleton, we get a monitor for Swiss Home. That makes, so they could attach the monitor to patients, we can get there, switch out the leads, and get a little transfer of patient care a little bit quicker. And typically FEMA looks a little bit better at regional grants. It helps more people. So we may try and do it that way. So for SVFR, I'd like a motion by the SVFR board to approve the submission of a grant for a rescue engine with a cost match up to $50,000.
Chief, I raised my hand electronically.
I see that.
Are we looking for a replacement for the current rescue and this piece of apparatus to be a type 3 style engine capable of rescue ops as well as fire suppression?
That would be correct, Jim.
Okay. And secondly, with these, I got to take these earplugs out. They bug me. With the grants available, what about extra PPE for the Western Lane people for fire ground activity? Do we have enough in our current inventory to assist them so we know that they are protected?
You know, as we, and I'll let Matt chip in as well, but as we train them, we have had enough, but I don't know if we have enough for the entire organization.
Matt, is there a chance that we can add that grant to get the appropriate PPE for those personnel?
Yeah, there is absolutely a chance that we could do that, Director Polisi. We do currently have a pretty good stockpile, and plus we annually budget for replacement and repair for like roughly 5,000 this year, but we're looking at going 10 to 15,000 over the next few years. The reason why is when we had the recruiting retention grant, we actually were able to get 10 sets of turnouts each time. That fell off, so we have to look at replacing that through other means.
Got it. And the reason why I bring this up is because I saw a couple of working structure fires here in town, and the Western Lane people were there. They were staged, ready to do their thing. But I want to make darn sure they've got every PPE necessary for fire ground activity. We don't want anybody in a position of an IDLH where they can be, you know, potentially injured.
You're 100% correct. Where we were actually already starting to work in cross training, COVID came into place where I backed off the big trainings. We're looking to, as soon as all the vaccines are done, 14 days after that, starting to initiate the training again. All the people that expressed that they want to do the training will actually already have the correct fitted turnout gear.
Great.
That's down at Station 2. So we've kind of shifted things around. Not to get too much in operations, but in a nutshell, that's what's going on.
I understand. And then back to the grant with this new piece of apparatus, we're applying for the grant. The extrication equipment that's going on this piece of apparatus, are we looking to go to the e-hydraulics so that the jaws of life, we'll call them, spreaders, cutters, rams, they're all going to be battery operated? And is that cost included?
Typically, that cost is not included, equipping them. We would anticipate we'd be doing it with current equipment.
Okay.
But we can certainly look at future grants, other grants for that.
I would highly recommend it because it takes the wear and tear down on personnel of having to move power units. And if we can go to e-hydraulics on all of our rescue equipment, I think it's money well spent. And
I agree 100% with you, Jim.
Okay.
And yeah, I agree. We have to go that direction.
all right, thank you, Chief. And
Director
with
Hickson.
that,
Wait a second.
I'm
We got
sorry.
Director Hickson.
Just a couple of quick questions and an observation. One, I definitely agree that moving towards e-hydraulics, I mean, you don't have to deal with, with the hoses, you don't have to deal, you have more maneuverability, it's safer, all of that stuff. I think that's great. I'm trying to remember, but it seemed like, didn't we apply for a grant for an e-hydraulics system a while back?
Yeah, we did.
A couple times.
And we didn't get it?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
it's very competitive.
Damn it. The other thing is regarding the new apparatus. What is the total? If we're getting a $50,000 grant, say we max out on that, what is the remaining balance on that?
It would be 500,000 total for the purchase. So it'd be around 500,000, depending on how it's spec'd out. So it'd be 450,000, which we have budgeted for vehicle replacement. So it would save us $450,000.
And I know that we have some apparatus that are approaching, I won't say end of life, but they're getting close.
Yes.
Would this be something that we would be able to essentially replace that with, or will we have to buy another apparatus in addition to this?
This would be in our replacement cycle. So we would be looking at replacing one of our older engine rescues with that. So it would replace that expenditure.
Okay, like the old engine 2 or something like that?
I couldn't tell you the number. I know, Matt, can you?
Actually, engine, what you would know is previously 602 is now 604.
Okay.
And engine 601 is at the main station, but rescue 602, even though it has limited miles, it's hard miles that's on it. That was what we're looking to replace. And why we're going that direction is mainly for the outlying areas that we have a large response to Highway 36, 126, 101 that doesn't have our coverage with the pumper. So we hit all the things for NFPA requirements.
Okay. Yeah.
so it's a 2-for-1. We're
Yes.
getting a rescue and an engine for one piece of apparatus. That's smart, you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way to go. I mean, it's cost effective and it
Right.
serves a lot of purposes. So, my feeling is, start looking along those lines long-term.
Yeah.
So we don't want to go with another ladder truck, huh?
No, I don't think so.
Unless the board wants us to, we'll do it.
There are other options out there, folks.
Well,
Cheers.
I will make a motion to approve that.
Okay.
A question, Director Spade. You talked about a 5% matching instead of a possibility instead of a 10. What's the difference in those two as far as being able to get a 5% matching?
It's number of people in your district. And it's the break off is at 20,000. So we're very close.
How do we get to that point? I mean, is it anything we can do as far as putting in data or something?
Yes, we would tell them how many citizens, and that's part of the process. You have to describe your district in detail.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, we'll get the break off and see if we're at the 5% or the 10%.
That's $25,000. I mean, it's a good piece of change.
Absolutely, and we'll try as best we can.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? So for SVFR board members only, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so for Western Lane, we're looking for a motion.
I'll make,
by the Western Lane Board to approve the submission of a grant for cardiac monitors with a cost match up to $17,000.
I'll make the motion that we approve the 10% cost match for $17,000 for the monitors.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Can I ask, Cindy, I'm gonna show my ignorance here, but I remember when Peace Harbor kind of changed monitors and they weren't consistent with, they weren't the same as Western Lanes anymore. Is that an issue with the ED, or do we need to look at a certain type of monitor? Matt, you probably know about that.
Cindy, Director Russell, please, if you feel like to go first, I'll add on afterwards.
No, you can go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually converted our monitors to Philips MRX. That was one of the big reasons why, other than operability for the EMS providers. Then 2-3 years ago, don't know exactly the timeline, Peace Health Corporate made a decision to go with Zoll monitors. So then we went essentially back in one big circle 15 years. So when we have somebody that's truly sick in an event, we have to rip the pads off, put the pads on, rip the pads off, So the interoperability that we worked really hard for in the community, that bridge was imploded. And now we're looking at potentially going to the monitors. We just spec'd out 3 different ones through the bidding process, and looking at it, we determined that we were going to wait because the technology isn't quite there. So yes, because of the changes that they did, it affected us and how we work together. So we're looking at that as well down the line.
We'll try and link back up then, is what you're saying. I mean, we're very aware of cross-coordinating those monitors, so that's great.
So Matt, what will happen with these new monitors? Will they match Peace Health or not?
It really depends on which monitor that we decide. There was 3 different monitors that we evaluated, and really from the feedback that I got from staff, that they were leaning towards the E. However, there's technology that's coming up in the next year or two that's making us kind of pause and make sure that we're getting to, we're going to go with Zoll, or we're going to go with the Tempest. There was just too much of a concern of technology coming out in the near future to have us pump our brakes on it, to wait until that technology comes out. We're good with our PM contracts. We're good within everything we need with these monitors. Unfortunately, it does play into our operations when we have to do a critical care transport.
Okay, can we get some kind of an agreement with Peace Health that we can stay together on the same monitors or similar technology?
I would love if we could.
Matt, I think that you have to look at the fact that we are Peace Health, and we're a small cog in the Peace Health wheel, and we're not going to make corporate do anything they don't want to do. And I think the best thing is what Matt is saying, is to see what the best technology is for the patient to give them the quality care that we can through this district. And that's with him looking at what the technology is best for each monitor. We can't base it off of what Peace Harbor is doing as versus Riverbend could do something different also. So you're just stuck. And so the best thing is to go with the best technology.
And we try to look for the interoperability always. We have strong bridges built with Peace Harbor, Peace Health. However, a lot of these decisions come out of Vancouver that really we don't even have a say, or I didn't even know about they changed monitors until they said, oh, by the way, you guys want to buy these extra monitors because we got new ones. I'm like, say what?
Any other questions or comments? Okay, for Western Lane Ambulance District Board members only, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, thank you. So our next agenda item is to talk about the director email policy, and I'll turn that over to Dina.
Okay, directors, we do provide you, as you know, a district email address. But I know that it's difficult for some of you, and some of you would like, you choose to use your personal or your work email address. So this is just about, knowing that all written correspondence is public record and needs to be retained. So we can arrange to have you use your personal or your work email address, but we would need to have you sign an agreement that you agree to, number one, having the possibility of your emails searched in the event of a public records request. But you also would need to make sure that you copy in one of us, staff or another director. So this is just up for discussion. I'd like to just kind of open it up and get your feedback. We can go either way. There's two options to decide. We can either stay with using the district issued email address, or you can decide to go with option 2 to use either or.
Well, from my perspective, I'd be happy to keep using the district's email if my device works with it. The issued iPad that I have would be great. I do get the emails from the district on my iPhone. My question is, I think it is good public policy for us to use only the Western Lane or SVFR email server for district business, but can we receive one-way mail at our personal email without having to divulge our other emails? In other words, can it just be a one-way, because we may not always see our Western Lane inbox? It would be nice if we could get the same kind of mail that any citizen would get, like if they requested the board packet, or if you were sending a notice of a meeting or something like that. If we could get that, that helps, because sometimes I've not received email in the right fashion and the right place for whatever reason. So it's nice to have that redundancy.
Dina, option 2 is the only one that would work for me, where I have my work emails, I have Western Lane Ambulance and WLFEA emails, and I have the City of Florence planning emails. I can't have 3 different devices to check every hour. That won't work for me. So I'll sign anything you need.
And just to let you know, the legal advice that I've received in the past, and I should verify it with our current attorney, but in the past it was, you could use a personal device to get public emails, and that's all you would have to divulge if there was a request for those public emails. They have no right to search your private emails. You would have to sign an affidavit saying that that was all the emails, but I'll get maybe some current update information on that.
So I have some kind of dumb technology questions that tag on to Larry and John, I guess. So I have 6 devices. Is it, I think you can set up email for the district on multiple devices. I think, Larry, that's what you're saying. You have it on your phone and you use your email address and your password, and you can set up an email account on your phone. And I assume that keeps you from having your personal items looked at if you're using district email, even if it's not on the district iPad. So that,
right, correct.
Okay. And so that's one option. I mean, you can set up your email on multiple devices. If you get a text or a phone call that says, Rick, you haven't checked your email in a week and I have a report I need you to get back on, does that open up any scrutiny of your personal emails?
Yes.
Rick, I have been through a public records request with the Planning Commission, and I was only required to send in emails of City Planning Commission nature.
Okay. And texts probably count if they have district business in them, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Now, if you're sending an email to district staff or to a district email address, then that's captured and that's no problem. So it would be, if you're emailing another director and you both have private emails, those that could be of interest in a public records request.
And more importantly, though, Chief Schick, if it goes to 3 people, because there's a quorum.
Yes, don't do that.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this policy and let individual directors pick their option.
Okay, so option 2?
I'd second that for discussion.
Well, I'm saying let the director pick option 1 or 2. I mean, it says,
yes.
If, some directors may choose to use just the agency email, and others may choose to use their private email. So I think the director needs to make that choice.
And I think that's option 2, says you have your choice, whatever you want.
Okay.
You'll be offered a district email address, and just make sure that we have your up-to-date email address.
Okay.
I would second Larry's motion.
Okay, that's for Western Lane. So let's do Western Lane first. So there's been a motion and a second already. Any further discussion on this by Western Lane?
So it's to allow both options.
Option 2 allows both.
Okay.
You got that, Holly? You're okay? Okay.
So Larry Farnsworth for one and Rick Yesney for the seconds.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So Western Lane Ambulance Directors only. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay. Same question for SVFR. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for the second option.
Ditto.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I was just going to say from a journalistic standpoint, John is correct that if we make a public records request for information, we don't just get to look at all of your emails. We have to be very specific about which ones we're talking about, which folks are involved in that. So, if you've got some personal emails to other people, that's not included in a public records request.
That's my understanding too.
Yeah.
Any other further questions, discussion? Okay, for SVFR board members only, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any SVFR board members opposed, say nay. Okay, it passes. Dina, do we have to do that for WLFEA, or that's just?
No,
we
I think
don't.
we covered it with the other two.
Perfect.
Right, so
Okay.
directors, I'll send out an email to you tomorrow, and if you could just respond and let me know which email address you choose to use on a regular basis.
Yeah, right.
Are you sending it to our,
I will send it to both. I usually send them to both.
I just had to ask. So I
Like
would
I'll
know.
catch one.
It
Thank
does make a
you.
little bit more work. We have to set up those email groups, but we can do that.
Use option
Okay.
2, Dina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next action item. We want to, it's not really approved. I just wanted to present the tentative fiscal year 22 budget calendar. And this covers all 3 agencies. We wanted to start with a workshop for WLFEA in March before we get into the actual budget committee meetings with Western Lane Ambulance District and SVFR. WLFEA doesn't have a budget committee. They're not a taxing authority. Of course, oversight is provided by each district as well as the WLFEA board, so that's covered. So we want to do WLFEA first, but I wouldn't be surprised. I hope I'm not, but we may have to have additional meetings after the other agencies meet once we get additional feedback. But I'm hoping with the WLFEA board members representing both districts, we can get pretty close to something that's acceptable for all directors. This calendar does have some room at the end if we have to have additional meetings. This is sort of an ideal calendar. We don't have to have it submitted until July 15th. So it would be the June board meeting at the end of the month that we want to have a public hearing or final public hearing and then to approve that. There is action needed by all 3 boards, and that would be to appoint, well, actually 2 boards would be to appoint the budget officer. So I am looking for unanimous consent to appoint the fire and EMS chief as the budget officer for SVFR, Western Lane Ambulance District, and we may as well go with WLFEA. So with unanimous consent, is there any objections to that? Hearing none, thank you. I'll be your budget officer, I think.
Buck stops with you.
Yeah, thank you. So we have one other issue, and then we can talk about the calendar if there's any questions. But so this is for SVFR board members only. We have an opening on the Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue Budget Committee. Ed Groshen's term was over on December 31st, 2020, and he decided not to ask for reappointment to the committee. And just as a side, I'll certainly put a thank you letter or a commendation together for Ed for his service to the district. And we'll present that to him at some point. So we have submitted a notice to the paper and local radio station to advertise the opening. We haven't received any responses yet. I don't know if the advertisements have gone out. Ed just notified us that he wasn't going to be continuing. We do have one individual that I'd like the board to consider, and that is our own director, Rick Yesney.
No way, no way.
He's extremely knowledgeable on financial issues, and he's expressed interest, which is also a big plus. So I'd like you to consider at least appointing him to the open budget committee position.
Did he fill out an app?
What's that?
Did he fill out an application?
That's up to the board, but if you want to see who else applies, we can certainly do that and maybe do it at the next board meeting.
Can I
Jim,
say,
did you have a comment?
I didn't realize that the term probably starts January 1. Is that correct? And I guess I feel a little conflicted about being on the Western Lane board and being on the budget committee for SVFR.
Well, and that was my other point, that you would be number 2 Western Lane ambulance director on the SVFR budget committee. Mr. Murphy is also on the committee.
Okay.
I don't know that that would be a bad thing. It's certainly something to acknowledge.
Okay.
It's fun, Rick. You get to give them fire guys all kinds of guff.
John, that was good, John.
Chief, I have a comment.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ron.
I don't think that we were going to find a more qualified person to be on the budget committee, but I think if there's public application, we have the responsibility to review them all.
Yes.
And that's actually my proposal, was that we prepare a list of interested individuals for presentation at the February board meeting. Even if you do select Rick, and I think he'd be a great choice, we still have a list of people that are interested for down the road that we could contact. So that's my proposal.
I threw my hand up there just because I without question, Rick would be a great asset to the board, but or to the committee. But I do think we need to give folks an opportunity to at least submit some applications and talk with them. And I agree. Having those folks in the bullpen down the road could be really great too.
Yes, I agree.
I agree.
Okay, any questions on the calendar or any discussion on the calendar?
May I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
I would like to see our WLFEA board act as a budget committee for the WLFEA budget. And I would like to see the WLFEA budget, once that board comes up with it, with you, Chief, to present that budget to the boards for their approval at the exact same time. I think RJ brought up a good point. You know, it was awkward for WLFEA's budget to be approved by SVFR last year, and then it came to Western Lane as a fait accompli, and we picked a different budget, and then there had to be a reconciliation process. It would be a lot cleaner, I think, if our 4 WLFEA board members would accept that responsibility and then give it to both boards at the same time. And then if we have that number, that administrative cost number from WLFEA, we can plug that into our individual budgets, and that would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, so the WLFEA board members are the workshop members, so they would be there. They're the budget committee, essentially.
Okay. Good deal.
Yeah, we could actually we could put it at the March, possibly at the March board meeting, presented, just so the directors have an idea, or the April one. That would work.
I agree with Director Farnsworth. I think that's smart.
And
Lay
Chief,
it out.
I think since we're not, like you said, a legal taxing district, I think the 4 WLFEA board members can just do a consensus for our recommendation to the other 2 boards.
Yes, that's what we did last
Agreed.
year. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we'll modify that calendar. We'll look at the board meetings coming up, but anticipate presentation of a draft WLFEA budget either at the March or April board meetings. I tried to only put one a week because I don't want to overwhelm everybody.
Yeah, yourself.
So
Okay.
are you going to modify the WLFEA board meetings then? You have March 18th and March 31st, so you'll
The
need
March
to
18th.
modify those dates.
Now, the March 18th will stay. So that'll be the first time the WLFEA board gets together to look at the budget and to go over what we've prepared. And then if the WLFEA board decides it's a good budget, it's worth going forward to all board members, then we'll do that at the March meeting. If we need to have another meeting, that'll be March 31st. And so we wouldn't present the WLFEA budget until the April meeting. Does that make sense?
No, because now you have Western Lane meeting on April 8th with no idea of what WLFEA is doing if we don't agree. So I think that you need to move some dates up on the WLFEA one so that it can be a done deal before the other boards go out for their budget meetings.
Okay, WLFEA will meet March 18th, and then we'll schedule another meeting before the board meeting. Then we'll have 2 meetings. I assume that's going to be enough.
Thank you.
And Cindy, remember at that first WFIA meeting, we'll push for Western Lane only paying 40% of the budget this year.
I thought we were going for 30%.
Oh, it's good.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Cindy and John. I'd really like to see the WFIA budget finished before we do our individual agency budgets.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's tough because then you're approving something in the budget before you approve it.
Well, we'd like to see it so that we can come to a consensus with the other agency, SVFR and Western Lane. We'd like to do that together instead of what happened last year.
I'm hoping it's going to work better, but we will see.
And Larry, will probably be presenting WFIA's proposed expenditures and income.
Right.
Okay, any other discussion on the tentative calendar? Okay. Last agenda item is, so at the December board meeting, there's a request from multiple directors to form a feasibility committee to look at issues pertaining to a consolidation or a merger of the districts. And that group did meet. I really saw the purpose of the group is to assist us in the best way to integrate operations for the districts, which could at some future date result in a merger. So integration at the operations level, that's what we've been doing for the last year and a half. But it doesn't necessarily commit us to a merger. So that's why I looked at this, instead of a feasibility group, I looked at it more as an advisory group to advise us on how we're doing with the integration of operations. So at the first meeting of the group, a decision was made to request that the committee be given special committee status with an associated charter, and draft charter has been reviewed by committee members and is should be attached in your board documents. Committee is also asking that the initial makeup of the group be the same directors who were appointed in December, and that would be Directors Webb and Yesney for Western Lane Ambulance District, and Directors Polisi and Green for SVFR. That's up to the board presidents to appoint, though certainly they can ask for input from the other directors. Committee has also expressed a lot of interest in obtaining citizen involvement and input, which we'll certainly try and incorporate into the meetings. And one additional role for this committee, it does fit into the charter, but I was talking to Jacob Callister with the Lane Council of Governments today. He's the person that's going to be leading our strategic planning process. And he thought it would be nice to have some input from a subcommittee of directors on that process. So how we set it up, what the directors are looking for, Certainly, all the directors will have input on the strategic planning process and the final outcome. But I thought that would be a good role for this committee. So hopefully you've read the charter. Are there any questions on this committee or the charter or the purpose of the committee?
I just had some input on that. I think it's a great idea to have a committee that's specifically geared towards oversight of the integration of the two districts, whether we get to the merger point or not. I think feasibility committee is probably not the right term for it. I'm thinking more of operations integrator or integration oversight committee or advisory committee. Essentially a committee that provides oversight to the integration process as we move towards potentially a merger. Don't know if that's going to happen 100%, but it could. And I think it would also allow us to have some continuity moving forward as, you know, board members change from each district over time. I mean, because we're talking about a long-term integration process here. It's not going to happen in 2 years or 3 years or even 4 probably. And during that time, we're going to have other committee members come in. But if we can have some continuity as we move through that, I think that's a really great idea. And I think the addition of a citizen at large or citizen committee member is really important to that.
Director Farnsworth, your hand's up.
Yes, I would just say that I think this is a great idea. I like Ned's suggestions. I'd like the committee to operate with no bias for or against a merger. I'd like that feasibility analysis to be strictly on the basis of what more will we bring to the public if we did merge. And I'd like to see the feasibility of combining all of these different service areas and taxing districts. And I'd like to see that done without bias so that we can look at it in the abstract and let the full boards make those kinds of decisions about whether to go forward. I don't want to see a recommendation to merge or not to merge. I'd just like to get the information, the feasibility presented to all the boards so that each director can make their view made.
Yeah, I don't think there's any attempt on this board. I mean, it really is just operations integration is what this board is looking at. So, yeah, those discussions, I think, I agree that takes the entire boards to discuss that. And I would think it would wait. This committee may raise some questions that we need to bring to the board. But yeah, there's no decision-making responsibilities for this board. Director Burns had his hand up.
Sorry. I was just going to ask Larry if I understood. You'd rather not see 3 options and come with a recommendation for one. You want to see all 3 options, pros and cons. Is that?
Yes, I'd like the.
It's not 3, by the way. It could be 8. Could be whatever.
Yeah, could be.
I don't have a bias towards 3.
Yeah, I mean, we're tasking this group with, as the chief says, you know, evaluating the operations and integration, but I'd like to get all of the information that we still lack about feasibility. And I prefer to receive that information without a bias or a recommendation. I'd like to see alternatives presented to the board, and we can decide if action is needed or no action is needed towards a merger.
See, and so, yeah, so when I think of feasibility I think more, is it possible to do a merger and what you would have to do? I think you're looking more at the options, not only a merger, are there other options? And it certainly is feasible. I mean, we could do it. We could set up tax zones. We could, you know, set a new district with a new tax rate. So it's feasible. Whether or not we want to do that, the board wants to do that, that's another question. And there would be options. Yeah, I think like Ned was saying, that's not in the near term, but certainly that could be available for discussion at any time.
I think Alan had something to say.
Yes.
Thank you.
Director Burns.
My biggest thing, and I'm the relatively newcomer here along with Mr. Spade and Mr. Polizzi, but we've never really talked about the merger. I would really love to hear relating to the feasibility, but I really like Mr. Farnsworth comment, no bias, but nobody has ever sat down and we've never really talked about the do's and the don'ts and the benefits and the negatives. There's check marks on both columns, and maybe this committee that was appointed last month, but I've been sitting for a year and a half and I'll probably get a bunch of phone calls tomorrow. I'm not against it, I'm not for it, but I've never ever sat down, we've never ever sat down as a body to talk about it in any
Right.
depth.
And I think that'll be a large part of that will be part of the strategic plan process. I think it'll come up with a lot of options for the future.
But Chief Schick, the issue I have is I've been through these mergers before, and sometimes you can get the ball so far down the path, you'll never get it back. And you spend a tremendous amount of money and you have to take another fork.
Well, and that's why, I don't know if you remember that the phases that I showed, it would take director approval to go further down the road.
Sure.
We have to go quite a ways before it would be irreversible. And there would be several votes by directors, discussions, understanding everything that's going on before that happens. So I think we're a ways to go. Director Polisi, your hand's up.
Yeah, I agree with Director Farnsworth. I think we need, if we're going to do this, is to come up with some service models. What do we want? Are they going to be annual, quarterly? I mean, there's so many options when you're looking at towards a partial merger, full merger, whatever. You really need to decide what is most cost effective to the community and what is going to provide the best benefit. And we need to really remind ourselves that we look at a significant transient clientele. And I mean that by our travelers that come through here. So we cannot, look past just the property owners and taxpayers here, but who's coming through. So, I mean, I do agree with Larry. Look at it long term. What is best?
Chief Schick, I have to take off. I have to go on an emergency, but I'll do whatever the board, whatever committee, but those are my concerns and I have to leave. I'm sorry.
Oh, thanks for your input, Alan.
No problem. Bye, folks.
Director Murphy, your hand's up.
Yes, it appears to me where we've been going in the last year and a half that I believe operationally we are 90% as if we are a merged districts. Our day-to-day operations, I think we're pretty much there as we operate. The only things that you might have to do down the road to formally merge is move all employees like to WLFEA, merge unions and things. But it appears our day-to-day operations are almost where you and Chief House want us to be with personnel, calls, and equipment. Is that true?
I wouldn't say we're 90%, but yes, we're trying to make the process, we're trying to make both agencies as efficient as possible. And so that goes a long way down that pathway. Go ahead and chip in, Matt.
I echo exactly what you said. I would put it more like we're at 60, 70%, but we're definitely moving forward with the operations and blending the service to actually what should be one service. That's ultimately the goal of this.
So blending services is going to be the easy piece of this if we do it, because of you and the chief and our crews and our staffs are so good. So really the feasibility is, can we merge tasking districts? How do we go about that? and what is the best for both taxing districts, what we deliver to the consumer. I mean, that's the big.
Yeah, and that's actually spelled out really well in Oregon state law, how you do that. Like I said, we would be setting up two tax zones to really mimic the larger Western Lane district and the SVFR district. So you use tax zones when you have different services offered within your district, and that's what this would be. So,
and to me, it really boils down to if my house catches on fire, if we are merged districts, am I going to benefit from that with just being Siuslaw Valley coming to work at my fire? Or if I am a car wreck and badly injured, will I get better service as a merged district? Or is it going to be any different than when Western Lane Ambulance was an individual district? To me, that's the big feasibility portion.
Yeah, a lot of that's already commonplace. I mean, when you have an accident, both districts are responding to that. When you have a cardiac arrest, heaven forbid, none of the people on the Zoom meeting have that. But yeah, you have both districts go to that. When you have a ground level fall that might be greater than what Western Lane Ambulance can handle, then yeah, they know they can call fire and they can come help. When you have a structure fire, we are getting to the point. The last few structure fires, EMS was also doing rehab, but they were assessing in the outside of the LDH area, cold zone, helping with whatever they could. So the operations, we're there and going in that direction and working. I mean, we have the union supporting with the letter. We have everything. And then forecast into the future when 2020, July 1, 2022 is what we're looking at to have all the operations under WLFEA. Then you do that for a few more years, and then you go to the vote for a full merger. I mean, it's not a process that's going to be done overnight.
No, and I agree, Matt. Thank you for your comments. But those are the kind of things, as we're moving forward, we need to get out to the general public.
Well, and I think that will be part of the strategic plan process when we do surveys. But I think what I look at, the most important point is that right now, when we need mutual aid, it's coming on the fire side, it's coming up from Reed Sports. On the ambulance side, it's coming up Lower Umpqua. If we had perfectly integrated organizations, that pushes mutual aid out even farther because we can use our own personnel. So if we need to staff another ambulance, we throw a firefighter, maybe a fire medic from the fire side on that. If I need additional firefighters, I've got them coming on an ambulance, but they've got bunker gear. So we don't have that piece right now. That's what I'm hoping for. It just really, I think you would get better service in that sense.
So Chief, do you want a motion from each board of directors or just a consensus?
I think, really, isn't this a board president? I think, let's go for a consensus. I think this is a board president decision, but I think you both would want your other directors' input.
Western Lane Ambulance Board, are you all okay with this?
Yes.
Okay, Western Lane's good to go, Chief.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Siuslaw Valley Fire Board, are there any objections to pursuing this?
None from me.
No.
So Ned, you still had your hand up. Did you want to say some?
I was just going to say that kind of agree with Matt in the sense that we're definitely moving in this direction already. I think having an advisory committee, because the biggest challenge is going to be the fact that the area that Western Lane Ambulance covers is not the same as the area that Siuslaw Valley Fire covers. And in order for us to do a combined taxing district, if we ever get to that point, is going to be answering the question of how do you separate out the tax dollars from a fire district that doesn't cover the same area as the ambulance district. But that's what this committee would be for, was be looking into these things and providing an advisory role to both boards as to what the options are.
And I don't, Ned, I don't know if you can see that. I think I'm sharing.
I see it.
But yeah, we would set up tax zones And this is a really poor. So the Western Lane Ambulance District would be one tax zone. And then the old SVFR district would be a second tax zone. So citizens, so nobody would pay anything different. So if you're outside of SVFR, you would pay just what you've been paying for Western Lane Ambulance District. It would go to, if it was WLFEA was the surviving name, it would go to WLFEA.
Got it.
Those in the SVFR
smart.
district would pay, it'd be a combination of the 154 and the 76, so it'd be 231. So theoretically, it could be absolutely no difference. You could charge more by setting a new rate, but that would be up to the boards to decide.
But then, Chief, it gives you the flexibility to be almost a Department of Public Safety, correct? Minus law enforcement, if you're doing it this way.
Yeah, well, it would be like a normal, we wouldn't have, so we wouldn't have fire marshal jurisdiction. It would only be in the SVFR.
Correct.
Old district. But yeah, it wouldn't be any different than what we're providing now. We would be providing the same services to the same people at the same addresses.
Perfect.
Well, I think the other component to this too is by having an advisory committee, we have a group that's dedicated to being able to explain and educate the public about what all of this means, that we have a body that is specifically focused on the different options. And as the public asks questions about things, we have a group that's able to educate them specifically about that one thing. I mean, obviously the board members will understand, but when you have a group that's specifically focused on this one aspect, I think having that educational component for the public is really important, as we move ahead in the coming years on this.
And just my own opinion, I didn't see any bias on the board. Matt and I are probably the only biased ones. We've made up our minds, but I think the board's been keeping their eyes open and are being honest with us. And certainly having public input, I think we'd like to integrate that into this committee.
Yeah, I think having a citizen at large or someone who is just a general public member as a member of this committee is going to be really important.
No, I agree. So SVFR board members, everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That's our agenda item. So this is director comments. Any director comments? We have hands up. Director Farnsworth.
Yeah, I have three things I'd like to go over. Chief, you gave us a calendar year breakdown of overtime beyond the normal scheduled overtime. We had vacation, sick leave, paid time off, training, MCB meetings, bereavement, military training. We had 7,418 hours of extra overtime that cost the district $282,431. Excuse me. Could you please give us an itemized update for 2020?
Oh, you said I gave you that to you last year?
You gave it to us for 2019.
Oh, sure. We can do that.
For an itemized update, it might be helpful as we get ready for the budget process.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I noticed that in our current financials, we're over budget by $55,333 in overtime. That's $12,600 for supervisors, $10,000 for staff, and $32,000 for part-time staff.
This year was a little bit different in that we had extra for COVID leave. We also had an employee went out on extended sick leave with some surgeries. And then we had the employee out on the workers' comp issue, so we were, yes, our overtime is higher. Unfortunately, we had those other circumstances, but you're right.
Well, in our collective bargaining agreement, doesn't it require us to pay overtime? By the staffing model, the way that the overtime is offered, it typically goes to people whose only opportunity to work at that point is with overtime. And so it looks like the overtime was done on all those hours. That's how we calculated the cost. So every single vacation hour, sick leave coverage, all of that was covered at overtime rates.
No, no,
Well,
a lot of that, a lot of that was covered with part-time though as well. I mean, where you're looking at the overtime, yes, but that wasn't all covered by the CBA employees.
Okay, well, that's what we're looking for is an update. So
Yeah,
if
no, we can.
item is update, that'd be great.
Sure.
So that's one item I had. The other thing that I'd like to find out is when this board and boards are going to do the chief's review.
That's up to the WLFEA board. Director Murphy?
What, at the next meeting, Chief, could you present us with your paperwork that we need to do and we'll start?
I think I sent it to you a couple months ago, but I can redo that. I can do that again.
Send it to all board members, please. I don't know if everybody got it. Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
I would just like to, I think that's an appropriate venue, the WLFEA board, but I'd like all board members to be able to participate through the WLFEA board.
What my hope is, Larry, the chief will send that to all the board members. Board members fill it out. Get your tabulations to one of the WLFEA 4 board members, and then we will tally it, look at it, and move forward.
Great, thank you. And my last item is just information. I know we do a lot of interfacility transfers. Matt, can you tell us how many interfacility transfers we've done with COVID patients?
I don't have the exact number. I think it was around 10 to 12 last time I checked.
And that's what, since the beginning of COVID?
Yes. Yeah, when we talk about this, it's all from the beginning, essentially March 14th when everything shut down.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had.
Director Yasny.
I just have a very brief comment that experience I had the other day coming into my office, which is between Banner Bank and Title Company across from Safeway. There was an individual laying in a nook. It was about 7:45 in the morning. It was 35 degrees, pouring rain, mixed snow. And this poor person, I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, was crumpled up in this nook, not moving. I came in and I called Bob Teeter, who said, call the police and you can get a hold of our mobile crisis response group, which we're working with. And I got to say, I called the police. They said they would call out a welfare check, and they were there in less than 10 minutes and had the individual up and were assisting them. So I just wanted to pass that on, that we all are really sponsoring that program. It's just a great program. So I don't know if you can pass anything on to Lori and her team, but we just haven't had the opportunity to do anything like that in the past. And the poor guy, it turned out it was a guy, got the help he needed.
No, absolutely. We're thinking about how we can expand that. It's been much more successful than I had ever hoped it was going to be. So it's nice that people are recognizing that. And Lori's doing a fantastic job.
So, Chief, can you help us out? Who should we call first? Should it always be the police department?
Yes, MCR people have to be dispatched through police. We expect law enforcement to go with them to make sure that it's safe. So absolutely, yeah, this should be either the non-emergent number or a 911 call, and they will tone out MCR with law enforcement.
Yeah, they had to call just the regular police department number, not 911, on a welfare check.
Either way.
Yeah, the only caveat to that is if EMS is on scene, or if fire were on scene, they identify that this is not something medical or fire is going to address, and we've cleared it, okay, there's no threats to it, then we'll call MCR as well to respond. But it's all police supported.
Director Polisi.
Yes, hi. Hey, last month I was able to witness a response by both EMS and fire for a structure response behind Safeway. And I just wanted to pass on some kudos to the chief and Chief House for a well-done operation. I was really impressed. EMS was spotted there waiting for, any potential victims. The RIC group was there ready to get involved if there was an issue. And thankfully, none of that was necessary because of a rapid, initial attack by the personnel who responded. So Chief and Chief House, well done. Good job. I was really impressed. It was
Thank you.
clean,
Thank you, Jim.
very, very clean.
I'll be sure to pass that on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Okay, the next board meeting is February 25th at 6 p.m. And we'll see you all there. Thanks for coming tonight.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.